So we have quite a few people here already. So without wasting any time, because we have our precious 2 hours with Yanto today. And thanks a lot, Yanto, to be here. And I know you're very busy, but you have given us time, and it is a very, very valuable experience for my colleagues, my friends, and of course the students. And so I'm just going to, I think everybody here knows Yanto, but nonetheless, I will just give you a very brief introduction about him and let him take over, right? Because we are very excited about what he's talking about. So Yanto is a very old friend of mine, and I think that is the first thing that I want to say about him, that he's an old friend, and he is an associate professor who is working in the Department of Applied Social Sciences and PolyU. He is also the founding director of the Center of Social Policy and Social Entrepreneurship. And a big congratulations, Yanto, because he has been identified as the top, one of the top scholars in the field of public administration and management. So he is number 5 in the Greater Bay Area. So lots of inspiration there. And he is also here to talk to you about his expertise, which is social entrepreneurship. And we have heard a lot about social enterprises, but there are quite a few questions in our mind as to what exactly they are, how are they different to NGOs, and how can you earn a profit? And there are quite a few misunderstandings also that we have in mind. And so we have our expert here who's going to let us know about everything, clearing all our misunderstandings. So thanks, Yanto, and then I will let you take over.
Thank you, Lena. Is this a recorded session?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lena, for introducing me. I'm Yanto Chandra. I think I have started doing research and teaching social entrepreneurship for nearly a decade now. I remember even before I started this journey in CTU in 2013, I have started the journey of developing interest on social entrepreneurship back then when I was still in University of Leeds in the UK. And also before that when I was still at the University of Amsterdam in Netherlands. So I think this talk is a bit more like a reflection for me, a bit more like also my observations, a bit of what I see in the literature, a bit of my tips and advice for various parties. But to start with, the primary audience for this talk are the students in the Education University of Hong Kong. And thanks for your invitation. And I know that there are many questions in students' minds about social entrepreneurship. But as I also talk through different components or different perspectives about social entrepreneurship, I think this talk may also have a bit of relevance to practitioners and some academia who are working in this area or have interest to work in this area. As you can see later, quite a bit of my ideas are a little bit hybridized or pluralistic, and that is because of my background. I came from a business background, working in the business world before I jumped into the academia, and also developing a lot of interest in doing research on entrepreneurship in general. And one of these areas that I have been interested in is social entrepreneurship. I think before we talk about social entrepreneurship, it's good to have a quick touch base about what entrepreneurship is really, because people may have a different perceptions about entrepreneurship. When people look at Jeff Bezos or Li Ka-shing, people thought, oh yeah, that's an entrepreneur. But actually that might be just one type of entrepreneurship. So there are many sort of ways, if you look at the history of entrepreneurship, I will not go through this a lot. That would be a very long lecture, but just a quick snapshot. Entrepreneurship has been around in the very old economics tradition, dating back to when people start talking about entrepreneurs are the people who shake the market and find a way to see some resources that are not allocated properly, and they can make some profit out of it. So entrepreneurship has existed in economics domain for a very long time, but its emergence only start to sort of kick, have a better sort of being appreciated in a mainstream literature and practice when people start to talk about entrepreneurship as a bunch of people's psychology or traits, like you like to have a sense of control of your life, you like to have some achievements, and then later people start to talk about, entrepreneurship is about behavior. It's about how you spot opportunities, how you exploit opportunities, being risk-taking, being innovative, being able to be aggressive against your competitor, things like that. And there are many others that you can see, including some more interesting ones in recent times, like looking at the genetics, whether people have a particular genes that will predispose them to be easily to be an entrepreneur. And they did this study among twins, using data from twins from their birth in the hospitals, and also the crypto and digital. But the focus on our topic is the social part, the social entrepreneurship, which started at least in the literature around early 2000s. There are a couple of more publications earlier than that, but the main ones are perhaps in the early 2000s. So you can see the practice of social entrepreneurship has started a little bit earlier than the year 2000. So it's like 20 odd years. In Hong Kong, the history is much shorter. And let's have a look at then what is the feature, or what are the features of social entrepreneurship. And I think the best way to look at this is just to have a look at the real examples of social entrepreneurship. So this is one example. It's a work integration social enterprise that works with people with disability. So you can see that a lot of disabled perhaps are staying at home, unemployed, or receiving welfare support, CSSAs, things like that. So what social enterprises are doing, giving them jobs and work skills training, give them income, give them dignity, change a little bit about their relations with other people who are disabled and who are not disabled, and to meet the public. And so social enterprise in around the world have been associated with this model, which is probably what I call helping people who are disadvantaged to enter the open labor market, because these people are sort of discriminated in the open labor market. And how they do that, they're selling, for example, in this case of Dignity Kitchen, which is a social enterprise from Singapore that opens a shop in Hong Kong about 1 year ago. They're selling attractive Singaporean style hawker food. And let's have a look at the other examples. Another one is what people like to call a more innovative model of social enterprise, what people call social innovation. So for example, the lady that you see on the sofa, a single parent with a young daughter, they used to live in Tong Fong in subdivided flats. And we all know that subdivided flats are not a very comfortable place to live. They're small and maybe unhygienic and dangerous. So Lightbee, as a social innovation, provides an alternative form of housing, that providing a more decent space. But how do they do that? In order to do that, and providing the rent to these tenants, this single parent, at a much below market rent, it's not easy things to do. But this is what makes social entrepreneurship very interesting. What Lightbee did was to work together with kind-hearted landlords, because there are many landlords or property owners who own more than one property, and they're willing to rent this property to Lightbee at below the market rate. And then line B will find 2 or more single-parent families, put them together to live in a shared housing, and they will help each other and work together. And they will send some social workers plan for these single parents' life in the next 3 years, because they are allowed to stay for 3 years only. So you can see from the 2 examples, they are not charities. They're providing a service. They're providing or selling products and services to generate revenue. So they are not the traditional charity as we have seen in the past, and they are also not the traditional type of business that we normally see around the world. Because again, social enterprise or social enterprise, the nature of it is quite slightly different, right? Now, where are the boundaries? We all know the kind of typical form of entrepreneurship, like Google, Microsoft, right? This type of entrepreneurship are productive, right? They create products that make our lives better. Maybe some of them producing medicines to make people's life better, live longer, developing airplanes, providing service so people can fly faster. But the majority of this type of entrepreneurship is still focusing on creating wealth for the shareholders, for the people who invest money to set up this type of enterprise, right? So, and their aim is still to maximize their profit. They are legal and they are visible, which means that their existence are supported by legal infrastructure, and they are visible, and you can see them in the stock market, you can see them all around. There are also other types of entrepreneurship. One of them is the unproductive type. For example, in the 30s or 40s in America, you have the Al Capone. In Japan, you have Yakuza. Of course, we have the same kind of organized crime in Hong Kong. So a lot of these criminal enterprises, they're actually business. If you think about it, they're actually a business. They run gambling, they run prostitution, they sell drugs. So these are also a form of entrepreneurship, and they are also one area of study. And they're also focusing on creating wealth for the leader and also for the members of the gang, right? I also have a lot of interest in this type of entrepreneurship. And also, they are illegal, but they are illegal and they're clandestine. Clandestine means they are under the radar. You won't really see them opening a shop saying, we are gang 128, we're opening a restaurant. They will not name or reveal themselves to the public. Then there's also another type called more destructive type. A lot of terrorist organizations belong to this category. So they're actually destroying other people's wealth, and they have a certain social or ideological objectives that they want to maximize, and they're also illegal or clandestine. Then, if you look at the commonalities among these three, they're all masculine. They're trying to focus on what I can get from these entrepreneurial activities. They're trying to be extractive, what's in this for me. They're trying to dominate, either dominate the market or dominate other people's mind. They're trying to optimize whatever they do for their own benefits. They're also linear. Then we also see, as I mentioned, the rise of social entrepreneurship as a different type of entrepreneurship, in which they are trying to focus on creating wealth and non-wealth for the stakeholders. And their focus is more on creating societal profit instead of profit just for the founder or for the investor or for the people who have put up their money to start this activity. And I'm not stopping there. You can also continue to the left with different types of entrepreneurship. Public entrepreneurship or policy entrepreneurship, that's the domain that many public policy makers are working on in creating new initiatives, for example, to make breakthrough when there is a deadlock in solving some public problems. And you also have environmental entrepreneurship and things like that. So the difference between the social entrepreneurship with the other type of entrepreneurship is perhaps the social entrepreneurship has a lot more feminine character to it. It's focusing on third person. Third person is about they, them, theirs. It's focusing on what is the benefit of my activity for other people. can my entrepreneurial activities benefit other people, whether it's women, whether it's ethnic minority, whether it's disabled people, all kind of others, right? And it's focused on stewardship. What can I do as a steward to keep the world, to make the world a better place and to keep the world in a good shape, to liberate people who are perhaps lower than others in a society. They're also focusing on not optimizing profit, but perhaps satisficing, to use the term from Herbert Simon, satisficing, to, as long as you achieve a certain target in your sales or in profit, and that's fine, and they can move on. And also regenerative. They try to be able to not just one-way linear, but also regenerative, so they can continue to prosper. There are many definitions, so I'm getting through a little bit on definitions here. Hopefully, I can make it this quick. There are so many different definitions depending on where you come from and which perspectives you're using. The common ones that are employed by people around the world is the business or management view, which is to look at social entrepreneurship as applying business principles to achieve social goals. Such as the examples I showed you earlier, they are using a restaurant as a business, right, to achieve their goal to help these disabled people, or to use a new way of doing innovative housing model to achieve the goals for the single parent families who previously lived in inadequate housing. If you come from a non-profit or social work sector, they look at social entrepreneurship as the marketization of non-profit organizations, because there are many non-profit organizations. And in Hong Kong, they call this NGOs. I would like to use non-profit to be more precise, because if government is here, non-government is outside of that circle, which means that everything can be non-government. But here I'm using non-profit because their purpose of these organizations are not to make profit for themselves, nor for their directors. So non-profit, a lot of them are actually getting into the field of social entrepreneurship by launching a lot of social enterprises. In fact, 60% of Hong Kong's social enterprises are launched by non-profits. You can also see from a public admin view, and I know many of you, many of the students in this session are actually studying policy, is to look at social entrepreneurship as extension of the government's arm to provide public and social services. Or we can also say as a mobilization of private capital to create public goods, or using finance to create or to tackle societal problems. So there are many different type of definitions. It's just up to us. But I think the first one, the first bullet point is the most common one. So let's get a little bit to the concepts. So this is an example of iBakery, which is launched by Tunghua, one of the largest non-profits in Hong Kong. So you can see they work closely with disabled people, give them employment, give them training, right? And this is a part what we call value creation, in which their goals is to create to achieve the social goals and moral goals. So that's what you see in the back end. And you don't necessarily will see these disabled people because they are in the kitchen side. But in the front side, you will see this iBakery from the front end. This is what you can see about their value capture, or how they achieve their economic goals. And how do they do that? They will sell the bakery produced by these disabled people to the public. They will sell them to the public. So they will generate sales, and then they will pay some expenses, and the profits will be reinvested, right, to further benefit the beneficiaries and to scale up. This is another example of my favorite social enterprise in Hong Kong, Diamond Cab. So it's a specialty taxi that caters for people who typically are on a wheelchair. Either you are very old or you are a wheelchair-bound person for some kind of disability, and you can't go anywhere typically. So Diamond Cab aims to provide this type of services, which are not catered for by the mainstream taxi or other types of public transport in Hong Kong. So what you can see in this model is they combine the value capture and value creation, which means that they have the ethical or moral and social goals and their commercial goals together. And what you can see that diamond cap is actually serving the middle class, because if you open the door of this taxi, it costs you $145, not $26. And some years later, they launched a foundation, a charity, a non-profit called Diamond Cap Foundation that serve the low-income elderly who wants to go out. Because, you know, elderly likes to go out, go to karaoke, but they need their transportation, right? So what you can do here is two organizations that are independent, but they're creating a synergy, helping one another. So this is slightly different from the previous example that I showed you, in which actually they have two separate entities. Again, there are many ways to describe what is social entrepreneurship. This is coming from some of my own work. I look at social entrepreneurship at the micro level, at the individual level, to see it as a struggle. A person will struggle between doing something for money or pecuniary or non-money, or to do something for my private interests, for my personal interests, or doing something for the public interest. So we're trying to study these things, and you know the answer. Many of those who become social entrepreneurs have a much stronger public interest or non-pecuniary interests as a driver for making them to be a social entrepreneur. I also look at social entrepreneurship as emancipatory work, which is a form of work to emancipate other people. So if you look at the examples that I've talked about earlier, the disabled, for example, a lot of these disabled are seen slightly lower than the majority of the society. So what social enterprise do is to bring these groups of disabled people to be more equalized with other members of the society. Like in this paper, in Journal of Business Venturing, I studied religious terrorists, people who are part of the terrorist organizations, and they found a new life and become a social entrepreneur. And what they did there was actually to talk to or get into terrorists who are still serving time in the prison and help them to regain a mainstream normal life. A lot of terrorists think they're higher than normal people, and they think they have the right to kill other people. So these are the one that consider themselves higher than the normal, mainstream people in the society, and social enterprise bring them closer. One way of doing that is to train them to be waiter or waitress in the restaurant social enterprise, to serve anybody, and you can't complain whoever is you are serving. You have to accept that the customer is higher than you. So the terrorists have to learn how to make themselves more equal than others. There are many ways to look at social. I'd like to look at this one because I think it's quite interesting and it's not much discussed in the literature. Looking at the financial perspective of social enterprises. So here I'm trying to use one example of to compare for-profit enterprise on the left and a social enterprise on the right in terms of how they generate revenue, the costs that they need to pay, and what happens at the end of the year when they have a surplus. Some people call them profit, right? So let's have a quick look to better understand the nature of social enterprises. So I'm using example cost per unit. Let's use iBakery. iBakery that sells the bread by employing disabled to work in the kitchen to sell the bread, right? So in order to make one piece of bread, your main costs are your flour, butter, sugar, things like that, right? So I'm using this as an example. I'm using this as an example that the cost per unit for the bread sold by this social enterprise is $20 compared to a for-profit enterprise that's selling at $15. I mean, this is just an example. The number can be anything. Now, why would the cost per unit by a social enterprise higher than a for-profit enterprise? There could be a lot of reasons. I'm giving that reasons there. One of them is perhaps, and this is actually from my own study, a lot of social enterprise hire people, as I mentioned earlier, hire people who are not able to enter the mainstream labor market. And these are the people who are less than optimal in their performance if they work in the actual world. For example, if you hire disadvantaged groups or disabled people, right? So for example, if you hire a disabled people, in order to make a bread, if you compare to a normal person can make, let's say 100 bread in 3 hours, right? But to a disabled person, to make that 100 pieces of bread, it may take them the whole day. So now you can start to see the time they spend is also longer and they need more effort. They also need more training in order to make the bread compared to a normal employees. So a lot of social enterprise is facing this issue. Some social enterprise have ethical sourcing. For example, they say when we make bread, we want to use safe ingredients. We don't want to use cheap ingredients that has chemicals that can endanger people's health. So if social enterprise have this in mind, then of course you can see the cost of the ingredients to make that piece of bread will be higher, right? But they can also have a counter to this cost that will reduce the cost. For example, they may have some free volunteers that knows their mission who are willing to help them. Or they may even get some corporate social responsibility from big companies and their philanthropic contributions, which will help them reduce the costs. So this is just one example. Salaries. Why would I put, for example, an example, the salary, the total salary, this is actually total salary for the year, right? The total salary paid by social enterprise will be higher than a non-profit. Perhaps the social enterprise want to pay a fairer salary to employees instead of paying them very, very little or beyond or below a particular wage level. Or they want to employ more people than needed because they are focusing on creating impact and social value. But if they also get free volunteers, they can also reduce the kind of salary that they need to pay. What about rent? Now, this is actually very interesting because many social enterprises pay lower rent than a typical business because the landlord, the owner of the mall, shopping mall, or the owner of the property knows what is a social enterprise and what their missions are, and they're giving them a huge discount to rent out their space to open the social enterprise. Or they may get even some other form of philanthropic contributions. Now, the key part here is what happens at the end of the financial year when the social enterprise have a surplus. So given all the calculations earlier, I can tell you that just using this example that the social enterprise in this example have a lower amount of profit compared to a normal for-profit enterprise. Right? But the key part here is what they do with the surplus. Now, in a typical for-profit enterprise, the shareholders or people who own this enterprise will want to claim the profit, right? They can make a decision how much they want to claim and how much they want to retain and put it in the bank, in the company. Right? But in social enterprise, particularly those that use a certain form of legal entity, for example, CIC, Community Interest Company, which is a form of legal entity for social enterprise in the UK, they have a mandate that a social enterprise can only claim up to 35% for the owners or the shareholders, right? And the rest needs to be redistributed to the society or beneficiaries in one way or another. So you can see social enterprise is not greedy. They're definitely not greedy. So if I put them all this together, these are the reasons. That what I want to show here is that being a social enterprise, you have a social goal. That social goal will influence your financials. And in the same way, your financials will influence how you achieve your social goals. For example, I know a social enterprise in Hong Kong that says in their mission statement that they want to be a one-digit or single-digit growth social enterprise, which means that if their profit goes beyond a single digit, which means that they go beyond 10%, they will reallocate those extra profit to benefit the society, to benefit the beneficiaries. So the social has implications on the financial, and the financial has implications on the social. So you can see social entrepreneurship is a bit more complex. That's why when you meet a person for the first time who have never heard about social enterprises, it takes a bit of time to explain to them So that's why I also come across with some observations later, which I will share with you about a lack of public understanding or public confusion about what is social enterprise. So social affects the financial affects the social. You can also see from the financial examples that I've shown earlier, that social entrepreneurship is a form of sacrificial work. Just like a mother who pulls out her own feathers so the child have a wing can fly, or a mother who becomes the mattress so the little child will have a comfortable sleep. So a lot of what social enterprises are doing is doing this type of sacrifice for the community, for the beneficiaries, and things like that. That's why I call it social entrepreneurship as sacrificial work. Let's go a little bit about a different sort of feature of social enterprises in terms of how we value them. What is the monetary value? For example, if you employ ex-offenders. So this is one example called 18 Chefs, a very famous restaurant in Singapore that hires a lot of ex-offenders. If you meet their staff members, all of them have tattoos everywhere, including Benny, the guy who doesn't have hair. Is full of tattoo on his back, dragons and everything. So former ex-offenders. So if you look at this an example, let's just use an example. That this Benny, the founder of 18 Chef, put an investment of $800,000, let's use Hong Kong dollars, to start running this restaurant. And they also get some volunteers. And if you count the value of the hours that these volunteers put in has some value. So you can add them up. Let's say the total is 825. And then if this social enterprise operate and can employ ex-offenders to work for them, right? So they will pay salary, right? They will pay salary to these ex-offenders. Just use a very conservative estimates to say that we are paying them $10,000 per month. They employ 10 person for 1 year. So they pay 1.2 million of salary per year. And if you employ these ex-offenders, they also may have a personal benefits by working in this social enterprise. They develop the confidence, they develop the self-esteem, the social capital increases, they have a new skill, and all this can be valued in terms of some form of money. And let's just use a very simple example here, that each person gains a $2,000 of these personal benefits. And there are 10 of them, so 20,000. And also think about if these ex-offenders do not cause problems in the society, we have a less crime, less drug addiction, all these sort of things. It can also have some benefit, but you can calculate it in many ways. So this here, I'm using examples from the value of the property in a neighborhood. So there's a research that says that if there's a reduced crime in a neighborhood, the property price in that area should be better than other neighborhoods that have a lot of crimes, right? And let's just use some example here that there are 2 incidents per year of a crime, and each incident will cost 130,000. Now, if you help these ex-offenders by bringing them to work in the social enterprise, you will reduce this type of cost to the society. Let's use an example of 2 incidents by 130,000, we have 260,000. So in total, we have 1.48 million. So you can think of this as a social return from the investment of running the social enterprise is 1.8 million divided by 825, you get 1.7. So that means for every $1, if you are an investor, every $1 that you invest to run this social enterprise that hires these ex-offenders, it will bring a return of $1.7. Is that good or bad? Of course it's good, because it's more than one. As long as it's more than one, that means the money that you put comes back to you. If you also count other expenses, now some accountants may disagree with this. If you count, if police needs to be dispatched to catch these ex-offenders or the criminals, you need to process these ex-offenders in the court, all costly, the hours, the time of the judges or the prosecutors, of the lawyers, and also putting people in the prison is also very costly. Some groups of social enterprise that deals with ex-offenders say it costs around 400,000 Hong Kong dollars to put a person in the prison. So here I'm just using a very simple example of $4 million for 10 people. The cost of putting 10 people in the prison, 4 million. So if you add that 4 million with the 1.48 million, so this social enterprise is actually generating 6.24. So $1 that you invest to run this social enterprise will bring a return of $6 more than $6. So what you can see from this example is a social entrepreneur is about gaining less for yourself so that others can gain more. So this is what I come to make sense of it. Who are these others? The beneficiaries directly, their families. So if you're helping one disabled, you are not only helping this disabled, but also her brothers, sisters, her parents, her aunties, her uncles, things like that. You're also helping the society. You are actually saving the government's money too. And for those of you who are interested in public policy, that's why all governments around the world, regardless whether they're on the right or on the left, they love social enterprises because it can save the government's budget. So this is some statistics that I can put up of some comparisons of these returns from every $1 spent on poverty alleviation in Hong Kong. So in the form of social welfare called CSSA is 0.96, which means that $1 that you give away, you only take $0.96, which is less than $1. So from the government's perspective, you're actually losing money. Employee returning scheme is 3.7, which means that $1 invested in people who have no skills or lacking skills, you retrain them, then they get a new job, is 3.7. But social enterprise funded under 3E, employing, so there's a name for that. It's one type of funding for social enterprises in Hong Kong, 3Es, is 7.2. So the SRY of this social enterprise are around 7.2. $1 that you invest give you $7 back. I guess I stop it there for a little while and think of whether you pay attention to what I've just mentioned to you. A private general practice clinic that you will see all around Hong Kong or other cities around the world. Is this a social entrepreneurship? Is this a social enterprise? Somebody give me an Ultraman. The simple answer to this is, what happens to the profit? This clinic will help a lot of people, right? They have a good mission to save people's health, to save people's life, right? They have a very good mission. But also have a look at what happens to the profit. The profit goes to the doctor, right? And this is internalized profit, right? Of course, it can have a spillover effect. So what I can see that a private general practice clinic, prima facie, is a normal for-profit. It's a productive entrepreneurship. It's just a normal, enterprise, a normal business. However, there are also many healthcare social enterprises. So if you look at in the examples in the UK, there are many doctors, dentists, nurses who used to work in the NHS system. These are the public healthcare system, public hospital system in the UK. They quit from the NHS system in order to set up their own clinics. And particularly they're looking at serving the population in the rural areas of the UK, in which people don't have access to healthcare easily. They need to travel like how many hours to go to bigger towns. So they set up clinics in rural areas so they can serve more society, more people, and also they also do not aim to make a lot of profits from the practice. Uber, sharing economy, is this social entrepreneurship? Suddenly people who don't have job now suddenly they can ride bicycle to deliver lunches. They can use their motorbike to take you to the airport, and you need to pay them. Actually, somehow they get a job. I also see another Ultraman sign there by Timothy. Well, primarily, this type of sharing economy, you have read about them. You know, there are a lot of criticisms about sharing economy in which a lot of the workers who work for the sharing economy model felt that they are not treated fairly. Well, if you can see, the majority of the profit still goes to the owner or shareholders of this type of sharing platforms. However, you can turn a sharing economy into a social entrepreneurship model, and that's not possible, and many of our students do that. Some stores, some bakeries sells the product at a very low price. For example, for one piece of bread, if you go to some other shops, it might cost you more than $20. But there's this particular chain of shops, they sell it around $5 or $6. Is this a social enterprise? Is this social entrepreneurship? I guess everyone pays attention very well here. So this is just their business model, right? This is their business model to attract customers, to buy their bread. And then you need to pay attention what happens to their profit. Who takes the profit? Right? The profit still goes to the owner, to the funder. There's this one company called Salesforce, which was quite making a bit of a noise some years ago. They claim they are a social enterprise. So actually they are a software company to help with CRM, customer relationship management. So they're selling the software to big companies. And then they tell the world that they are a social enterprise. And suddenly a lot of journalists come to them and try to say, well, you are not a social enterprise. What you mean social there is actually your technology allows the companies to know more about your customers. And that's what you meant by social. So the social here does not mean that tackling some problems or social problems or environmental problems, but it's more like social means you are working with a lot of people or you are working with a lot of customers. That's what they meant by social. And then the company received a lot of complaints, and at the end, they have to remove the mention of social enterprise in their website, in their brochures, in their marketing material. And they even wanted to trademark the term social enterprise, despite that it has been around for many years. So companies want to take ownership of the word social enterprise, and that's reported in one of my papers. Danny Teo, the guy without the hair, the founder of the 18 Chef restaurant that I mentioned earlier, is he a social entrepreneur? So he's an ex-offender who spent 10 years in prisons, and then he launched chain restaurants, employ a lot of deviant youths and ex-offenders. One of their signature dish is called heart attack fried rice. You can see they're very creative. So you need to be very creative to be a social entrepreneur. And by naming it heart attack fried rice, they attract a lot of youngsters to go and eat there. They have very good business on my trip to visit them in Singapore. Is this a social enterprise? Is this person a social entrepreneur? When I visited him and interviewed him, he said, we never scream loudly to the world that we are social enterprise. But at the back of what we do, we're actually saving a lot of these ex-offenders. So now you can start to see there are some who do not put a big logo, we are social enterprise, but eventually what they do, they're actually a social enterprise. They have a very strong mission to help the ex-offenders while selling good food, attractive food. This is another restaurants in Singapore. They use a pay as you wish. So if you go to this restaurant, you can pay any amount. So if you are homeless, you don't have money, you can pay just 1 cent. But if you are a professional, if you're a big businessman, you want to pay them $500 or you want to pay them $10,000, it's up to you. Pay as you wish model. Is this a social enterprise? Now you start to see that it's getting blurry here. It's getting blurry. They also do not brand themselves as a social enterprise. But if you look at deeper what they do, they're very religious. And later I will talk a little bit about the role of religion and faith as one of the driving force for social entrepreneurship. They are not a social, but they want to do good. They want to do good and help others. I mean, the purpose of this is naturally they want to benefit more people. they want their food to be able to benefit not only those who have money to buy and eat this food, maybe it will cost them 10 or 20 Singapore dollars, but they also want to help those who don't have money to eat properly by going to this restaurant. So they also have a form of social mission without mentioning it, without talking about it. So you start to see it's getting blurry here. What about Ming Guo? Have you been to Sam Shui Po? Ming Guo, who runs a Peiho restaurant, is he a social entrepreneur? No. It depends. It depends on when you talk to him. If you talk to him much earlier, when he started doing this, he didn't even know what he was doing is called social entrepreneurship. So what he did was he ran a Chinese restaurant, and he always give away plenty of lunch boxes to the poor elderly in Sam Shui Po, right? And at other point, he will sell these lunch boxes at a very low price, from 10 something dollars to more recently 20 something dollars for one lunch, for around 3 or 4 dishes in one box, which is much cheaper compared to if you eat in the other, restaurants. If you talk to him much earlier in his career, he didn't even know what is a social entrepreneurship, and he doesn't use the label social enterprise. Only in recent years, when suddenly we talk about social enterprise, journalists go to him, interview him about what he's doing. They say, you are doing work as a social entrepreneur. And our students or other students who go and talk to him in his shop and say, you are a social enterprise. Then he starts to embrace this concept. Yeah, I'm a social enterprise. I'm a social entrepreneur. I didn't think of that before, right? So people can do good of fusing the social purpose or social mission with a business together. That has existed for a long time in Asia, particularly. But we never claimed this term. It has been around for actually hundreds of years, but we just never mentioned this. So what you can say is the concept of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship is very socially constructed. It is all of us together who create this notion of social entrepreneurship. And that's why then these people start saying, oh yeah, we are social enterprise. We are social entrepreneurs. Or in fact, they may not even think they're social enterprise. But if something already exists without the name, it already exists. So what we do is actually just providing a name to it. So all these examples that I've done with you just now to check your attention, the purpose of doing this is I want to say that social entrepreneurship might face a tomato problem. Now, what do I mean by that? Tomato problem. What is a tomato problem? Does social enterprise or social entrepreneurship face a tomato problem? Let me ask you, tomato, is it fruit or vegetables? So it's getting blurry, right? So now we start about social entrepreneurship, it's getting blurry. So does social entrepreneurship has a tomato problem? Now, if you look at tomato and I ask you, is tomato a fruit or vegetables? Now, this also has been a subject of debate. So I found some sources from National Geographic. In biology, particularly botany, they classify tomato as a form of fruit, because fruit is the fertilized ovary of a flower. Fruit is that type of fertilized ovary that is not, tomato is a type of this fertilized ovary that is not sweet. Tomato is not sweet, right? Some of them may be, but they're not sweet. But you also have other types of things that are sweet. The sweet ones are very obvious, mango, oranges, but there are also fruits that are not sweet, and tomato is one of them. But the funny part is, there's this entrepreneur, a trader, an importer. He tried to import tomato from overseas into the US. And this was like, wow, so long ago. And then he wanted to bypass the requirements to pay tax to the government. Because if you import something, you need to pay tax to the government, right? And then there's this called Tariff Act 1883, which mandate him to pay tax to the government. He said, I don't want to pay tax. How do I go about this? So at the end, he took this case to the court. And the judges ruled is tomato is a vegetable. So since then on, tomato is more likely known to be a vegetable instead of fruit, where in fact biologically it's a fruit. So does social enterprise have this fruit or vegetable problem? My guess is yes, because it's a very slippery term. Sometimes in the eyes of public who doesn't quite know what is a social enterprise, they may think, oh, this is just a company. And they think, wow, they're charging $145, but they don't know what exactly social enterprise. So, or some people may think, oh, it's just a charity. So that's why this concept or conception of a social enterprise is very slippery. So that brings me to more of the different type of challenges of social enterprises. First of all, it still lacks legal and official recognition. So if you are in the UK, you are lucky enough to have a CIC model, which if you have a social enterprise, you can incorporate it as a legal status called CIC, Community Interest Company. In the US, they have a different form, benefit corporation, low profit limited liability company, or L3C. In Hong Kong, you have typically two ways to incorporate legally of a social enterprise. Either you incorporate it as a Section 88, which is as a charity or non-profit, or you can also incorporate it as limited by guarantee or limited by shares. Now, the problem is because there's a lack of official and legal recognition for social enterprise, the problem happens when social enterprise try to sell their goods and services to the public sector, to the government. They may not have any proof of identity because you are only, for example, only registered as a company limited. So when you're trying to sell, you cannot claim that you are a social enterprise. Or when you want to use the public space that is owned by the government, or you want to access private capital, if you are a Section 88, it's very difficult to raise private capital. You want to get some investors to invest in your social enterprise. It can be very difficult because of the constraint of the legal form. And the other challenge is anyone can claim that they are a social enterprise. So there's a social washing or greenwashing happening. And I've talked to so many people and they say, yeah, this can happen and has happened. So there are fake social enterprises, misidentified social enterprises, or business that claim to be social enterprises where in fact they are not. And actually this can taint the legitimacy of social enterprise. So people will lose their trust on social enterprise as a sector just because of one person or one organization who misuse the label social enterprise. And of course, there's still no official recognition from the government. From the public perception, still there are many people who see social enterprise as a kind of charity, which means that they will give away things for free. They rely on government grants to survive. Some people will think they are just another business. But if you look at closely, based on the examples of iBakery that I showed you earlier, they have a backstage. The backstage is where they work closely with the disabled people, give them training and things like that, produce the bakery products, and they have a front stage. This is where they're facing the market, where they sell the bread to the public. There's a called front end and back end stage work. There's also a lot of hype about social entrepreneurship versus the actual reality of what social enterprise can actually do. There's a lot of claims that social enterprise definitely will deliver positive social impact, but in some of our own work, we collected data in the Philippines. So there's a huge typhoon that swept the Philippines. Tens of thousands of people lost homes and the economic infrastructure was damaged. And there's some social enterprise that was set up to help these people, to give them job, to give them some income by making these handicraft bags and providing boats to catch some fish. You can see that when social enterprise went into the community, they can also create some tensions with the existing beliefs in the society, because this area where we were doing the study, a lot of this community are very poor, and they receive a lot of free stuff from international NGOs, international nonprofits like, you know, all these big names that you can think of, aid organization and government assistance. They get things for free, right? But when social enterprises go there and say, no, you will not get things for free, you need to work in order to earn the income from us. So it creates a tension of the values. And because of the tension, and also because some of the social enterprises, they employ some locals to be the leader among the groups of villages that they're working with. There is a friction between these leaders with the members of these villages. So they start to gossip one another, and they feel unequal treatment. So I'm saying that social enterprise can do a lot of good things, but they also need to be very careful in terms of how they do their things so that they do not create negative externality. Negative externality is a negative social impact, which is actually causing the society to have some issues after you launch your social enterprises there. Social enterprises also try to achieve many objectives, and in some of these conception about social enterprise is, social entrepreneurship has this two components: creating value for the society and also capturing value economically, combined together. But Santos argue that the social enterprise should focus on one instead of both, because it's very difficult to compare both. But if you look at the nature of social entrepreneurship, many of them are trying to combine multiple objectives: profit, people, planet, and maybe some other things. So it's not very easy to combine all of these things together. It's like you're trying to be rich, to be kind, to be beautiful, all in one person, all in one organization. At the end, you will look like a little bit strange. So this is the nature. That's why maybe perhaps somebody can say that later. A lot of people thought social entrepreneurs are a strange type of individuals. Oh, they are a little bit strange. Yes, because they want to do this, and it's difficult to do social enterprise, and they want to do it. But many of them can do it really well and very successfully. And because they need to look after so many different objectives, the social, the non-social objectives, it can be challenging, and they can become a little bit inefficient. So the financial calculation that I showed you earlier are just some examples of the inefficiency that social enterprises can have or have to deal with. They can also deal with mission drifting, which means that asking whether social enterprise need to serve one master or two masters. If your master is a social goal, is your purpose is the commercial goal, can you serve both masters? In some organizations, they feel it's too difficult to serve two masters: the money and the social goals. For example, the cases of some microfinance called Banco Compartamos in Mexico, and also SK's microfinance in India. So when they were set up, their purpose is very clear. The social mission is very clear. They want to alleviate poverty. They provide small loans to the poor people, so the poor people can use these small loans without giving collateral, without giving their house certificate, without giving their salary proof. They can get these loans so they can grow more chickens, grow more vegetables, have more cows, so they can increase their family income. But later, when this microfinance grow bigger, the key management and the key sort of shareholders say, wow, our model works. We actually can be a very profitable organization. And then what they did is they list this organization in the stock market. So that means they become a for-profit company. And the owner, people who have ownership in this bank, suddenly becomes very rich. This is called mission drifting. So the warning about mission drifting has been around for a very long time. Now, another challenge for social enterprise is, this is particularly relevant for Hong Kong. A lot of the social enterprises that we have talked to, they feel that a lot of the policies for the social enterprise are very competitive, which makes it very difficult for small and even new social enterprises to get this kind of funding, because they're very competitive driven, they're very business driven, and they feel that there's a lot of financial metrics that are being used to judge their potential. And they also claim that many of these funding go to the big name nonprofit organizations or big foundations. Right? So these are some of the challenges for those who are in Hong Kong. Having said that, the Hong Kong government has spent a lot of money to help grow the social entrepreneurship and innovation sector. In my own calculation, Hong Kong government have dedicated or spent at least $2 billion to spur the growth of the social entrepreneurship sector. Even SI Fund have got the second $500 million. So they're already 1 billion type of fund. Half of them is actually gone. And you also government funding for microfinance, for enhancing self-reliance, community investment fund, enhancing employment for people with disabilities, things like that. Another challenge for social enterprise is the lack of influence. Because if you look around, the majority of the social enterprises are small scale, local, and they do not grow really fast. Although the awareness about social enterprise is growing, but they're still very insignificant. And you have not really seen social enterprises that have become a very multinational operations. The only few examples that I can think of are, for example, Dialogue in the Dark, which is now called Dialogue Experience in Germany. They have quite a multinational operations, which means that they started with one social enterprise in Germany, and they're able to replicate this model, convincing other parts of the world to set up a similar operations using the same brand, with the same approach. But they are still a very minority, and you haven't seen any unicorn. A unicorn is a $1 billion value organization. We haven't seen a unicorn social enterprises around the world. Haven't seen it. Again, perhaps this is partly contributed by the challenges to run social enterprise that I mentioned earlier. In my own estimate of all social enterprises, compared to the number of all small and medium enterprises globally, there is only around 0.1% to 1% social enterprise compared to all small and medium enterprises globally. So these are just my breakdown. In Hong Kong, in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, you can see China have about 500 something, Hong Kong has 700 something, Taiwan has 300 something, UK has 70,000, it's quite a lot. ASEAN, they claim, some news says ASEAN has 10 countries that have a 1 million. I don't know whether this is an exaggeration or not, but you can start to see that compared to the number of social enterprises divided by the number of small and medium enterprises, social enterprise is still a very small in terms of the number. Are there misunderstandings? I kind of mentioned that a little bit, but nowadays there's so many jargons, there's so many words that people use to describe social enterprises or in relevance to social enterprises: social entrepreneurship, social innovation, social business, social venture, shelter workshop, microfinance, cooperative, corporate social responsibility, creating shared value, B corporation, benefit corporation, stakeholder capitalism, so endless. And we have ESG. So where is the boundary of social enterprises? Is social enterprise the same as this thing? Is it different? I think partly because of the lack of misunderstanding about the social enterprise, that makes it, I think, makes it difficult to grow the social enterprise sector. And this is our own internal critique in order to help the social enterprise grow. So the word that we use is very important. So it may be good to come up with a more commonly or generally accepted term, so everybody have the same conception about what is considered social entrepreneurship or social enterprise. Let me give you another perspective to that. Looking at what do they try to optimize? Do they sell some product or service to gain some resources? What are their main source of financing? What is their policy when they have profit at the end of the year, or dividend policy? And what happens to the assets? Maybe the equipments, the computers, the chairs, the tables. Where does this asset go to if this organization is closed? If you look at non-profit organization, they're trying to optimize social value. They don't sell anything. They rely on donation and grants. Whatever surplus they have will have to stay. If this non-profit is closed, all of the assets need to go to another non-profit or to the government, depending on the regulations, right? And then you start to say, well, there are different types of social entrepreneurship. You have non-profit that runs their own business. And this is also a form of social enterprise, or NPO, or non-profit run social enterprise, which tries to optimize social value. But their financing, they also rely on their mother non-profit organizations. They sell products to gain revenue, to pay for the expenses. If they have surplus, the surplus stay, things like that. So, and you have Muhammad Yunus have a definition for social business. If you look at Muhammad Yunus' definition for social business, it's actually quite similar to the notion of non-profit run business, in which they still focus on social value. If there is surplus profit at the end of the year, the surplus needs to stay. So if you look at the Grameen collaboration with Danone, or Grameen's collaboration with other water companies, the profit that they make from this joint venture need to stay in that organization. They are not allowed to share this profit among the owners or the shareholders. But what Yunus has not provided us some evidence or some ideas is what happened to the assets of this social business when they are closed, because there's still no legal case. So a lot of lawyers say you only know that particular form of organizations when there's a litigation, when there's a legal case in the court, then you will know what happened. So for example, the Muhammad Yunus definition of social business, we haven't seen any of them have gone to the court and what happened to their assets when they are in the court. So we're still unknown about this. And then this social enterprise that I'm using, the CIC, the focus is social and commercial value. They sell some product or services, they try to get some financing from the sales, from the founders' investment, from impact investors. If they have profit, some portion of the profit need to stay in the social enterprise. The others need to be reinvested for the community, for the beneficiaries. And what happened to the assets when they're closed is subject to the legal registrations. I know that in CIC, they also have some regulations of what happened to the assets. But if you look at the general business, including those that have a CSR or doing ESG or B Corp, their focus is still making commercial profit. Surplus will go to the shareholders. And if it's closed, after you pay back to the creditors, people who lend you some money, then the rest actually go to the shareholders. So you can see there are so many different types of social enterprise. This is actually part of the challenges of misunderstanding in terms of how people try to make sense of social enterprises. There's also some debate about the outcomes, or misunderstanding about the outcomes of social enterprise. Some people argue that social entrepreneurship can be a panacea, a magic pill that solves all the problem, and they may make non-profit organizations and government irrelevant. But is that really true? Now, in some of my studies with my collaborator, we look at, for example, in the case of social enterprises that works with disabled people, a lot of the social enterprise can only work with people with little to mild disability. But if some of these disabled people are very severely disabled, the social enterprise cannot work with them. And it's better that these groups of people are served by non-profits or the social worker, not by the social enterprise. But you also have a general groups of the people that can be served by the government services. So we say that the social enterprise has a particular niche there in what they do, and they may not serve everything. And it's not in the best interest for social enterprise to do everything. But this is only from the case of social enterprise that deals with disability. You also have social enterprise that provides some product-centric of product focus, like a green factory, a green products. Actually, this can go to across the board, regardless whether who is consuming these goods. But what we can say is the social enterprise and social innovation is a natural partners of the government and nonprofit. Now, some other misunderstandings about social entrepreneurship is that people think that social entrepreneurship or social enterprise provide low quality products and services. They provide low salary. Is that really true? In our study, what we know is the social enterprise needs to compete in the open market. So if you open a restaurant employing ex-offenders or disabled, what people see is that thing that you are selling in the front end of your shop, right? You are competing with everyone else who are selling similar food or in the food category. You need to have a good quality. You need to treat and pay your employees well to survive the game. Can they survive if they sell low quality? Well, we have seen many social enterprises that do not sell high quality products eventually have to close down. And those who do not pay the employees well, do not treat employees well, eventually we have difficulties. And they may also lose the trust from a lot of stakeholders. And if you look at the role of social enterprise, they are an emancipator. If they want to emancipate people, so they need to find a way to do well as an employer and to do well as a company that sells these goods and services. That's why I always challenge my social enterprise friends and tell them, can you pay them better than normal business? If you're able to pay them better than normal business, then you are actually doing even better than just a social enterprise. Because if you can pay them better, then you're actually really helping a lot, helping these beneficiaries a lot. Some other misunderstanding or challenges, misunderstanding perhaps, is on the pricing. Some people think, social enterprise are very expensive, charging a very expensive products and services. Well, maybe partly true, but if you think of it, the size of their population that they can serve is much smaller than the general business. If you are a taxi company, a for-profit taxi company, you can basically serve anybody. But if you are a diamond cap and you know what is your social mission, you are serving a much smaller market. And as an implication, as a financial implication of that is they have to charge higher for the taxi service. But again, pricing is just a strategy. I've seen some social enterprises that are selling lower price products compared to the market price. For example, this person, Wayne Chow, agent of change social enterprise. What they do is they work together with some large companies that sells rice, cooking oil, and snacks. And then these big companies, as part of their CSR, they know the mission of Wayne and his agent of change. They sell these goods, cooking oil, whatever, at much lower price. And then Wayne will be able to sell this cooking oil to the poor elderly in Hong Kong. So this elderly can afford to buy cooking oils and rice. You can even see buy one, give one model. It's just a pricing as a strategy. So pricing does not really define a social enterprise. Another misconception or some challenges is people thought that social enterprise is only for people who have a business background or have a business experience. While it's true that the social enterprise has two origins, some come from people who have a business background who jump into the social enterprise sector. Some come from the nonprofit or even from the government who jump into the social enterprise sector. But in reality, social entrepreneurship is a very multidisciplinary practice and multidisciplinary line of inquiry. It combines multiple areas from business, social science, technology, social work, design. And you can see a lot of social entrepreneurs come from very wide variety of background, from being a social worker, work in nonprofit organization like Tung Wan, and they launched iBakery. Or someone who was previously an engineer and worked in the business, and then in his retirement, he set up a social enterprise like Dignity Kitchen. Or a medical doctor who actually set up a community pharmacy as a social enterprise, which is healthcare social enterprise. Or some young man who studied language and start their own social enterprises. Some other misunderstanding is around pedagogy, which is the understanding about how you teach people. There's misconception that social entrepreneurship is a form of service learning. But the way I see it, that service learning is more about learning how to serve the community, which is a very great thing, is a very valuable thing. But the angle in terms of how you look at or how you teach people about social entrepreneurship is teaching them to learn how to tackle problems in some new ways and better ways. So those are just some of my observations. Now, what if you don't have any resources? There's some question about, what if I don't have resources? There are many ways to do that. You can create something out of nothing. We call it bricolage. You can use your friends' free time to help you. That's called labor bricolage. You can ask from your best friend or your uncle if they have a small space in the shop for you to set up a social. That's called spatial bricolage. You can get some materials that people don't use. Like I know there's a social enterprise that take unused construction materials left over by some big property developers, like tiles, toilet bowls, and they use this to renovate the homes owned by some elderly. Material bricolage. You also have temporal bricolage. So some restaurants, they open Monday to Friday. They don't open Saturday and Sunday. So some social enterprises say, can we use your space to run our own selling dessert only for Saturday and Sunday? So that's got a different form of temporal bricolage. So, but having said all of this, my favorite form of social entrepreneurship is what I call for-profit social enterprise and certified B Corp. Eating Chef, the example that I mentioned to you repeatedly, is one of my favorite. They don't claim to be a social enterprise. They just say, we're just a business. But deep inside it, they really have a very strong engine to create social value, to help these ex-offenders, and also a very successful way of business. They're very innovative in their menu, in their products, great marketing, and they have grown into a chain of more than 10 restaurants selling over 20 million Singaporean dollars. And around 40%, 50% of the employees are ex-offenders, and they pay them very fairly. They give them a very clear career tracks. They never call themselves social enterprises, but I think it's a very successful social enterprises. And I think this could be a model that we can think of in the future. Another type is what people now call certified B Corporation, or just called B Corporation. One example is Ben & Jerry. They sell ice cream. And then they were acquired by Unilever some years ago. So B Corporation is actually a certification by an independent party to tell the world that this particular company, for example, Ben & Jerry, they focus on creating value, not only for the people, for the planet, but also they can be financially viable. So I call this, they have not Intel inside, not a Intel chip inside, but SEness inside. So they try to be the best ice cream. They try to make a fair profit. They also try to create social change by using safe ingredients, safe food production, non-genetic modified. They use fair trade. Don't use hormone-grown beef to get as a material for the milk to make the ice creams. They also support non-violence and not weapon systems. And they also have a way to give back a certain fixed percentage. And they have this certification to be called B corporations. Who can be a social entrepreneur? If you look at the history of economics, even Adam Smith have talked about it, that humans have compassion. That you want to benefit other people. You want other people to do good. You want other people to be well. And this is actually a very key fundamental of human nature. But strangely, the whole idea of social entrepreneurship is, or the whole strange about capitalism and business is people love his other book. called The Wealth of Nations. And that book is much more popular and sell a lot more. Where in fact, this is the key message, or the key message that he wants to deliver, but people pick up the other book from Adam Smith, which is looking at business, creating wealth, right? But actually he said, well, we need to look at our role as a person and how we can have compassion for others in how we engage in economic affairs. Even Confucius have talked about 5 cardinal values, 仁义礼智信, right? 仁, humanity. That is actually what a lot of social entrepreneurship about from the social value creation side. And I also mentioned a little bit earlier about religion and faith. So there's a growing movement of people realizing that we can infuse our faith in terms of how we do business. So from the Christian group, they have, for example, business as mission. So carrying business as a love of God. In the Muslim world, they have this called wakaf, a form of endowment where you can use a kind of impact investing to help the people who need them. In the Buddhism, they also have this called gross national happiness, how to have compassion in doing your work and business. In my own study, we found that there are many reasons why people become social entrepreneurs. For example, because you have this sense of you like to become a part of the collective or collectivism. You have this compassion of altruism, some spiritual drivers, but also some of these economic drivers. Like you have this professional background, you have entrepreneurial background, you have some resources, but also in terms of your personal characters, in terms of whether you like to serve the public. What we found, public service motivation is a very important driver of social entrepreneurship. Money ethics, people who consider it's not good to be too much focusing about money in your life. They are more likely to be social entrepreneurs. But if they think too much about money, they're less likely to have the intention to be social entrepreneurs. But also meaning in life. A lot of people are trying to find meaning in life. And those who are trying to find meaning in life will find social entrepreneurship to be a very natural path. What are the ways forward for us? Despite all of these challenges, misunderstanding, lack of clarity, is it a tomato? Is it a fruit? The tomato problem that we have in social entrepreneurship, I would like to look at social entrepreneurship as a method. Instead of making more arguments and debate, let's look at social entrepreneurship as a method of solving problems in new and better ways. What do I mean by that? It means that, for example, one of the approaches is using a prediction method. This is more like similar with science. You make some plans. If you can make some plans with some goals and mobilize some resources, you can achieve something and reduce the chances of failing in the social enterprise by using a prediction approach. So this is social entrepreneurs can use this type of approach. They can also use a controlling approach. For example, if you want to control your loss, control your chances of failing, they can use this controlling approach as a method. So it has been used a lot. So for example, you say, I can only spend $200,000 to set up the social enterprises. Then don't go and borrow $2 million from the bank to run the social enterprise. If you can only afford $200,000, use this $200,000 and use other people's money. So this is called controlling. Controlling as a method to do social entrepreneurship. And you keep on embracing more people to help you. There's also a more newer approach called the experimentation or future making approach. What it involves is they look at social entrepreneurship, or we can see social entrepreneurship as a method to experiment, to test some beliefs, to test about some assumptions, and then we can revise these assumptions to ensure that the social enterprise can really work and we can visualize them. Let me give one example. Lightbee. I like to use this because I think they are a very good example of social enterprise as a method of experimentation and future making. So as an experimentation, you can see the role of social enterprise is like a scientist. So they come up with some hypothesis or some some hunches, and then they test this, and then they keep on refining it. For example, Lightbee. What is a Lightbee? Lightbee is a shared affordable housing for single-parent families. At least this is what they have until last year. I know this year they changed a little bit. They call themselves as a training organization, but we can say that Lightbee is a shared affordable housing for single-parent families as a model, right? To explain what it is. Now, what is the existing belief? The existing belief, this is what the founders say. They say that the idea to set up a Lightbee is quite naive, it's quite foolish. This is what they claim. I said, because nobody has done this type of shared housing in Hong Kong. So what they do, they say, we want to challenge this belief. And their belief is, what if there are some good landlords who are willing to help others who need some homes below the market rate? So they try to challenge that belief that this is impossible. And then the hypothesis is, well, will landlords be interested to join? Where can I find them? Who will be the tenants? And what my model will look like? So then they did the experiment. They found one participating landlord, two participating landlord, and they tried to validate this process to see, can it really work? And apparently it works. From 1 to 12 to 20 something. And what they do is they use the idle resources owned by others to launch this. They get a property license. They offer life and career planning for these single-parent families. And they show to big companies and to the government that this model can work. And then they continue to refine this model and develop their portfolio. So if you can see what happens to Lightbee is just recent time, they work together with, actually there's unused government property near the Samchang area in the New Territories. It's unused staff quarter. So they use that 100 units and transform them into a larger form of Lightbee. They call it Light Home. So they're testing this assumption in a very step-by-step manner. And now I know that they are working on a bigger projects. So this is how it works of looking at social impact as a method. And when you talk about social impact as a method, it means that actually you can teach it. You can replicate the process to reduce the chances of error, the chances of failing. You can also see in terms of method that social impact has been used a lot as an agent of development. Well, development always talk about dealing with poverty, right? So they can learn, social impact can learn from development economic as a form of experiment. For example, should we give some poor villages free mosquito nets? Also, we charge them $2 to get one mosquito net. And they found that, this economist found that if you charge them with $2, the malaria incidence in that village is much lower than if you give the mosquito nets for free. Because the villagers who receive the mosquito nets for free eventually do not put on the mosquito nets at night. There's a lack of commitment. So that's why social entrepreneurship actually has a potential, because it doesn't offer things for free. And can we see social entrepreneurship as a seed or as a form of way to develop what we call public entrepreneurship, to tackle with bigger issues? For example, in the public sphere or public sector, there's a bureaucracy problem. To get one policy launched takes a lot of time because of the bureaucracy, and you need to involve a lot of people. And also the public entrepreneur can be of a larger scale because they have a lot of resources. So there may be something that we can see how social entrepreneurship can be connected with public entrepreneurship to change the rule of the game, to create new form of public organizations, creatively mobilize and manage the public resources, and creating a form of collaboration between different parties. My second thinking or thought about a future ways forward for social entrepreneurship is to look at social entrepreneurship not the end, not an end to itself, but as a prototype form of future ways of organizing. Now, if you look at what I've mentioned earlier on about profit and purpose, profit is like oil. Purpose is like water. If you put them together, they don't really match. They don't really blend. Right? They naturally will separate. So only a certain type of people So certain type of people will prefer profit only. Certain type of people will prefer purpose only, and they will go to different fields and they might not talk to each other. What social entrepreneurship and social innovation is trying to do here to say, well, maybe there's another way. There's an alternative way. Maybe we can mix the oil and water together. But if we have learned some basic chemistry, the reason that the oil and water doesn't mix is because there is some air in the oil. And if you are able to find a way to remove this air, then the water and the oil will be mixed together like the picture on the right. So social entrepreneurship is trying to fuse these two, to fuse this profit and purpose together. And social entrepreneurship is trying to say, combining the profit and purpose is possible, but it's still relatively an experiment. But we can see that there's a possibility, despite all the challenges and misunderstanding, that combining the two is possible. Now, here are my visualizations about some possibilities of how we could possibly combine profit and purpose using certification, legal framework, business that fuse purpose for profit, some form of metrics or accounting, some ways of doing investment that combine these two, consumption, so that people will support profit and purpose, education, and also coalition. So a lot of these things are going on. Some of the hot topics right now is B Corporation. Eventually, we had an academic forum in Hong Kong Social Enterprise Summit just this November talking about B Corporation. They also have a legislation called Benefit Corporation legislation, which is a slightly different thing. And you also have what we call corporate social innovation, which is bringing social innovation as the engine of what a company is doing instead of just a small CSR project. Also, we may need a new form of metrics and accounting. People call it social accounting or impact-weighted accounts. We also may need to see impact accounting is investing, helping one another and helping social enterprise working together. Coalition, we may also need to see whether social entrepreneurship can have a coalition with big business, with major summits, with public education is used to help people to consume more of organizations that are fusing the profit and purpose, and also mainstreaming social entrepreneurship in education. For example, the B Corporation that I mentioned earlier, there's still a gap between social enterprise field or sector industry with the B Corporation. They're almost like not very related, but they can be working closer and helping one another. So what is the B Corp? Is a voluntary certification that I mentioned early on. It allows the organization, the company, to report their scores about how they treat the community, the customers, the environment, the governance, and they need to pass a certain assessment, need to reach 80 points. If they pass, they can get a report. If they get this, it will last for about 3 years. If they want to continue recertify, they will need to go through another rounds of certification. But this is something that is happening in the business world, but they're not so much really working together. I think somehow people will say social enterprise inspired certified B Corporation, but you can also see B Corporation could also inspire social enterprise in terms of their reporting, because still many social enterprises do not have this proper reporting like what B Corp is doing, helping one another. What about some legal legislation, some law? In the US and some other countries, they have this called benefit corporation law. It's a form of legal structure that tells the business that they need to create general public benefit. And with this incorporated in their legal structure, the directors of this business will have the right to make decisions that will benefit the stakeholders, the community, the consumers, the employees, instead of being judged by the ability to bring more profit for the owner, for the shareholders. So this generating public benefit is a new thing, a relatively new thing. And these organizations need to create a benefit report. The good thing about this is it will reduce the due diligence time should investors want to invest in this type of company that have that are this legally incorporated as a benefit corporation. It's a big area. Another type is called is a legal innovation called low profit limited liability company, called L3C. It's still now based in the US, and their goal is still to create a lot of social value, but they're allowed to make a profit. And a lot of foundations, charities use this L3C because it allows them to invest to generate financial returns. And you know that if a charity can get financial returns, then they can reinvest the financial returns to benefit more people. They're beneficiaries, right? So it's relatively small. There are only 1,700 something L3Cs by end of 2 years ago. For example, this L3C have been used by affordable housing projects, some spaces where people rent out below the market rate, some medical laboratories, some schools, to provide this different type of service. One prominent example is a milk company in which they were nearly went bankrupt. And then the farmers and other stakeholders gather together and say, let's create an L3C company for this milk company, in which the farmers will own 46%. And they will be guaranteed to receive 90% of the profits at the end of the year. And the remaining of the shares are owned by different parties. So these are perhaps some of the new models in terms of legal innovation that perhaps social entrepreneurship can learn from. The other type that is not much discussed is circular economy or circular enterprise. One example is this called Breer, which was set up by a bunch of Hong Kong USD students. So what they do is they take unused, unsold bread at the end of the day from their partner bakery shops, and then they use that as ingredients to make the beer. They're still in the early stages, but you can see this is very different from the linear economy that take from the environment, make something, consume and throw away, creating a lot of environmental problems. So what they're doing here is becoming a circular, using the waste and keep on circling, creating new resources. What about ESG? Could this be something that could inspire the field of social entrepreneurship or vice versa? So we all know that environmental, social, and governance is a hot topic now around the world, including in Hong Kong. So if you are publicly listed companies, you may need to report what your company is doing in terms of these different areas. This is just one example from one of the company that provided scoring called MSCI. For example, if you are Coca-Cola, how is your carbon footprint in your factory? How do you use water? How do you deal with packaging and waste? How is the health and safety in your factory? What is the safety of your Coca-Cola drinks? What about the nutrition of your Coca-Cola drinks? How do you have women in your board? Do you have ethnic minority? Do you pay tax? Do you treat employees well? So there's a lot of different things from ESG that I think is quite interesting, which social entrepreneurship field can kind of like learn from each other and help one another. This is some of my quick analysis that, for example, HSBC have done some research on the annual filings of listed companies, S&P 500 companies, in terms of the E, S, and G words that they use in their annual reports. So you can see from 2014 to 2020, within that period, the word environment has increased by 6%, the word social increased by 16%, the word governance increased by 12%. And if you look at the proportion, down to 80%, 5.3, 14%. So you can see a lot of companies are moving in that direction and pay more attention on E and S and G. This is the breakdown. So it really depends on which sector you are. If you are utilities and energy companies, you pay a lot of attention on environmental issues. If you are almost kind of companies, you always pay attention to social. Look at the social, the bar is quite high, almost equal. And then if you look at the governance, all of them say they have a good governance and things like that. In China, the ESG reporting by companies are also growing really fast. ESG investing in terms of companies that invest in ESG companies and also the assets that are entrusted to asset managers in called ESG investing in the stock market has seen a very steady rise. So you can see more and more globally from the not only from the investors side, but also from the consumer side. So if consumers and investors think paying attention to your E and S and G in a company, in an economy is important, then a lot of the companies will focus on these issues. And if more companies focus on these issues, then eventually actually that is good, right, for everybody. They pay attention to the employees better. They pay attention to the communities better. They pay attention to the environment better. So then we talk about SE versus ESG. Well, social entrepreneurship is kind of related to B Corp and ESG in terms of their nuances, in terms of mixing this profit with people, with planet, but they still don't talk to each other yet, right? There can be more room for collaboration and helping each other and learning from each other. But we know that SE is trying to optimize different objectives. But what we know is social entrepreneurship is trying to bring a lot of the feminine characters into the very masculine-centric form of entrepreneurship. Although there's still hype and pessimism about what social entrepreneurship can do, and some misunderstanding about it, and there's a lot of jargons, I do believe that the social entrepreneurs should not walk alone. So this is actually my last slide. I'm trying to envision a world where we have a shared prosperity as our final goal, or I call it 360-degree capitalism. We already have social enterprises, social innovation, and nonprofits that are doing business, and also other forms like cooperatives, community enterprises. And from the company side, you have CSR, CSV, corporate social innovation, companies practicing bottom of the pyramid. I haven't mentioned much about this early on. B Corps, and you also have seen more and more companies are doing ESG. Why don't we work together? Why don't we find a common theme and commonality together? But how to make this possible? I think we may need this set of drivers. Perhaps certifications could be a language that we can use to talk to one another across these different sectors. Have some legal framework, have some new ways of metrics or accounting system, a new form of coalition of collaborations among them, a new way of investment to drive these three things, a new way of consuming so that people can support, knowing that there's a lot of benefit to everyone if all of these different sectors are working together and doing well. And also education, that if we can inform the public better in terms of these different elements that has a lot of feminine character. What I call it is a hybrid feminine and masculine system, because the traditional corporation is very masculine. But these things that I'm drawing here are a hybrid of feminine and masculine. Now, what if we can have a stronger hybrid of feminine and masculine system and values and ways of working? If this can be hybridized, how this can help us achieve shared prosperity. Hopefully this will bring us to a new ways of practice, even perhaps a new ways of how we do our research. Thank you. Anyway.
Again, thank you very much, Yanto. That was very nice, very informative. I think we have a lot of people here, so I will open the floor and let the audience ask questions. Anybody has any question to ask?
Nina, so perhaps I can start with a very simple question. Thank you, Yanto, for the talk about social entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. It's very informative and insightful and inspiring as well, because I know little about the social entrepreneurship. So I have a very simple question. In your example, the 18 chef, you mentioned that they don't recognize them as a social enterprises. So is this in the legal term? So it means that the government does not recognize them as a social enterprise, so that they don't need to So they have to pay a tax like a non-business company, right?
My understanding is in the Singaporean context, they don't have a particular legal structure for social enterprise. So
Okay, I see.
yeah, but what 18 Chef is doing is they just incorporate their restaurant as a normal business.
I see.
But they know that they are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yango, can I supplement?
Yes.
Yeah, and yes, from my understanding, first of all, 18 Chef, they start with a social mission business. That means they want to create job opportunities for ex-convicted. And secondly, whenever they in Singapore join the Association of Social Enterprise, then they will be classified as a social enterprise. Of course, when you enter to their association, you have to fulfill their requirement. And then you feel free to visit their website, which can help you to understand what are the requirements of the social enterprise being qualified in Singapore. And thirdly, as I have mentioned, that the founder, Benny Sito, has just stepped down and also left the 18 Chef to enjoy his second life with his wife. Just for your information.
Yes, he's very successful running a chain of more than 10 restaurants, and he's retiring. Now the question is the succession. What will happen if they are not very careful enough? They could be mission drifting and just turn into a normal company instead of retaining their identity as a social enterprise. Now, in terms of whether they are social enterprise or not, I have multiple interviews when he went to Singapore to meet Benny and talk to him. And you can even see in my video, I made a in my YouTube channel, there's a video about him, which I always use as a live case in my teaching. He initially never called himself a social enterprise. He initially never called himself. But later, more and more people talk about it. And then he also realized, oh yeah, we are also social enterprise. But you can, when you ask him, he said, we will not shout very loud. We are social enterprise. We will not put our logo 18 Chef social enterprise. They say they will not do that. They say somehow, this is what he said. He said, if you come and eat in 18 Chef, just because you feel pity to my ex-offenders, you feel that these ex-offenders need some help. He said, then I'm a failed social entrepreneur. This is what he said. He said, but if you come to 18 Chef and you enjoy my food, you can treasure my food, and also you can also see my tattooed stuff in the kitchen doing the work. But if you like our food, because we are doing a successful business, then he said, then we are a successful social enterprise. So he's offering a very unconventional way to look at social enterprise. He said, you don't need to shout very loud and put a large logo that you also, or display your ex-offenders standing in front of your shop to say all have tattoos and things like that. He said, we don't need to do that. He said we would rather just be a normal business, but we know we are creating a lot of. It's like your right hand is doing good thing. Don't let your left hand know that your right hand is doing good things. So this is what he's trying to tell me. But thanks a lot, Timothy. He always posted very funny photos and comments in Facebook. So I know he's a very, very creative guy. So some people thought, can criminals be a good businessman? Can criminals be a good social entrepreneur? I have a strong conviction they will be a very, very successful entrepreneur and successful social entrepreneur, because a lot of criminals, they're very creative. A lot of terrorists are very creative. How can you bomb a downtown city as a terrorist if you're not creative and a very careful planner? They need to plan where to put the bomb, who need to carry the bombs, who need to defuse by when. They need to set up the whole team. And the same skills can be used to set up a social enterprise. And the same criminal enterprise skills where you sell drugs and prostitutions and gambling, you can use the same skill to do good, to create social enterprise. And there are many social enterprise. That's why I did quite a lot of study on social entrepreneurs who used to be ex-offenders and terrorists. So some other people focus on disability, but I focus a lot on these groups of people because I think they are super interesting.
Thanks, Yanto. We have two your hands up. I think they want to ask you questions. So we can ask Castro, and then Glenn.
Yes, good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for the very interesting sharing. And I think it's really very needed here in Hong Kong to have such a sharing session. My question is particularly because actually I've been trying to go into social entrepreneurship for the last year. And there are a few things that I have noticed in the ecosystem. So I just wanted to ask, and I particularly as a former teacher, I am really very interested to try to use the opportunity offered now through the applied learning to spearhead entrepreneurship teaching in the secondary school education, because I think as far as the professor can see, the Singapore model is actually they're very much more advanced than we are. And in fact, some of the universities are utilizing graduates of Singapore or companies from Singapore to train social entrepreneurs here in Hong Kong. So may I ask the professor if there's any way that, for example, he can nurture, he can facilitate, he can help to number one, try to put applied learning, social entrepreneurship, or even just normal entrepreneurship in Hong Kong, our educational system. And second of all, is there any way for him, for example, to see how we can further encourage social entrepreneurship in the universities and in the larger society? Thank you.
Those are very, very topical and very hot questions. I think, interestingly, as I observe it, there are more and more universities in Hong Kong that are offering full degree in social entrepreneurship. I think that is one thing we need to celebrate. And Education U is offering Bachelor in Social Policy and Development Studies. Lingnan has Master in Social Innovation. A couple of years ago, we launched Bachelor in Social Policy and Social Entrepreneurship. And I know Baptist U is doing the same. So we can see that it's heading towards that direction. So I think that's a very positive news to celebrate. About the first question on applied learning, I'm a big supporter in using applied learning, because a lot of the things about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship in particular, you can't really learn the whole thing in lectures. You need to get them to do something. So what I've seen some examples, for example, I know some universities have launched their own social enterprise in the campus. And I know there are quite a few universities in the US is doing the same. And this is a very good form of applied learning. And they will assign students to work in the social enterprise in the campus. And this is, I think, is a very good way of, providing applied learning or experiential learning. So students have a real hands-on experience. For example, your colleague are some disabled people, or your colleague are some ethnic minority, and you work together in that social enterprise in the campus. And maybe that is selling food or selling some crafts, I don't know. And I think that will be a very useful experience. And that can be a credit bearing without students taking lectures in learning these things. And also some of the models is some universities, I know they're creating some sort of co-working space. So I know Baptist U is trying to do this, co-working space to allow students to use the space to really launch something. I don't know whether they're allowed to make the transactions, financial transactions by selling something in the campus. That really depends on the policy on each university, but I think those are very positive development. What is also quite interesting, in my view, is how people are using different approaches. Of course, for example, bringing in social enterprise into the campus. For example, some vegetarian restaurants, social enterprise that open their branch in a campus. So this is part of also educating the higher learning communities to learn more. And in terms of encouraging more of social entrepreneurship education in the high school and in the university, I'm a major supporter of that, and I think it's really much needed. And particularly with the millennial generation and Generation Z, we all know that they are craving. They're craving for doing good. But also, they also need to think that if you're just doing good without making it sustainable, it can be difficult. For example, and this is always the language that is often used by very successful social entrepreneurs that I'm quoting here. They say, you need to save yourself first in order to save others. So you need to ensure that your social enterprise can be financially viable, then you can help others. So if you just think about others without making yourself financially viable, you yourself cannot swim in the water, and how can you save someone else? So make sure you can float in the water. Once you are stable financially, then you can help others. So I think the younger generations, the millennials, the Generation Z, and perhaps the generations afterwards, are having a lot more of this consciousness about doing good and looking at a business should not be just existing for the purpose of enriching the owners or the shareholders, but also they can play a larger role in the society. Now, just one example. If Coca-Cola does not care about its employees, environment, community, everything, then actually their competitors also don't care. And we live in the same world. But if Coca-Cola start to care about this environment, about the community, about treating employees, then you start to see their competitors like Pepsi and other beverage companies will start to do the same thing to match Coca-Cola. Otherwise, they think Coca-Cola will win. So you can also see if they can compete in a good way. So, but you need to get them to do that. You need somebody to lead that. And I think that is why we have these social enterprises who are the pioneers to show that the profit and purpose can be mixed together and it can work. Although it's not so easy, it's possible to do. But if you can have a model where you can do it really well without losing a lot of money, without being too inefficient, then you can be quite successful, like the case of the 18th Chef, which is opening 10 branches. And I think that could be a kind of a model that we can think of how to make social enterprise to be a much larger sector instead of being happy, because a lot of social enterprises are very happy with opening one shop. But if we want to make the world better, we also need to think of how we can open 10 shops, how we can open 100 shops, all in social enterprise, and how we can open internationalize selling our model into another countries. So that is also a form of influence. And one other example that I like to use is the Big Issue. The Big Issue that sells magazines to help the homeless people in the UK. So the homeless people will pick up this magazine for £1, and they can go to the street and sell the magazine at £2. So the $1 pound goes to the homeless guys. And they provide training and provide this as a source of income for the homeless. But they just don't stop there. Lord Bird, the founder of Big Issue, was elected into the legislation, into the chamber. And they're also promoting a lot how we can deal with poverty and deal with the poverty issues using the ideas of social enterprise. So I think having an influence also in a policy level could be something that is good in order to see how we can use social entrepreneurship as a mindset to solve a lot of problems.
And thanks, Yanto. Glenn?
Yes, Yanto, I just have a question. You know that about the B corporation and also the ESG, right? I think at the end of the presentation, you kind of say that they don't talk to each other. But another way around, I see that is because they are doing the division of labor. Because I think the social enterprise oriented, I think Timothy can add on that, is quite social welfare oriented, right? So, I mean, that's why that is social service, right? And mainly is for the minority. And also the B corporation obviously is originally from the US, right? And you just said the small, medium enterprise, they just have to fill out 200 questions, and then they get the threshold around 80 out of 200, then they can catch the batch, right? So mainly is to test your so-called your process of business, right? And ESG obviously is for the listed company, right? It's a big company, right? So obviously, I mean, if you look at the nature, it's hard for them to talk to each other. So I want to hear more, I mean, how you see that they actually can change maybe information or have the wisdom to boost what we call the share prosperity? I mean, I just want to hear from your experience, or maybe Timothy can add on. I mean, how actually they can talk to each other, because it seems that there are 3 different kind of sectors. Okay.
So, Glenn, you want me to say something first? Or
yes, please. Yes.
Okay. I think you are talking about a very interesting observation. To me, the B Corp is still very, very small scale in the world. Mm-hmm. There are not more than 4,000 companies, and even not all of them are belong to the 500. I mean the big 500. And I think the issue is that the B Corp is only just really for so-called benefit for the corporate, but not for the community. We always say that. So they are talking about more how to curate better business environment among their sector. And then extendedly, they can hopefully to also benefit the staff and then to the staff community. So you can see that it is a secondary and even tertiary result, other than social enterprise primarily to deal with the poorest in the society. Mm-hmm. And then for the ESG, actually, is talking about the international trade requirement. Because now all our ordinance there requesting all public listed company have to comply with the ESG requirement. But as you may also learn about the CSR, the first part is CSR, and then now second part to ESG. And then nowadays the CSR already turned into PR event and campaign of the private companies. They're not really doing so-called CSR. And I worry that when there's a legislation asking them have to perform ESG as well, then ESG will walk the same route of the CSR. Will again just only in name, a broad sense. So you can see now there are a lot of consultancy companies helping the big business to fill in the CSR and then ESG report. That means they are not really motivated to do this, but just surrender to the company audience requirement or the public listed companies requirement. So they are very passive indeed, So to me, I think if we really want to create a more integrated atmosphere or embryon in the society, I would think that it would be better start from the so-called how should I say, society instead of from the ordinance or from the legislation, because legislation is more tend to be passive, that you opt for it, but you're not actively motivated to do it. And then if we start from the root of the society, it's more motivated. So I think the social enterprise should expand the scope to include and invite the corporate and also government department work together to create more social impact for the society together. So it will be a better way to curate a better social care community. Yanto, now to you.
Thank you so much, Glenn and Timothy. I'm glad to hear your comments. In one way, I do agree that currently there's a division of labor, as Glenn said, between SE versus companies that are using B Corp and the ESG. And Timothy's comment about companies are not being genuine when they have an ESG. The purpose is actually at this stage is just simply for compliance and reporting instead of actually transforming their company to do the business in a new way. And also B Corp is still relatively small and they're relatively new, only 4,000 B Corps around the world. When I mentioned the word certification, I was trying to say that there are different ways of certification. B Corp is just one. There are different other ways, for example, certification as a social enterprise. So for example, if social enterprises can have a clear certification, for example, people will argue that a legislation will be very difficult. And I think many people on this part of this argument, they say we don't want legislation to legislate which one is social enterprise, which one is not social enterprise. But I think at least certification will help. At this moment, we have endorsement, right? We have SEE mark, Social Enterprise Endorsement Mark by Hong Kong General Chamber of Social Enterprise. So they have that. And I think the number of social enterprises that are certified is also growing. So I think that certification will be very useful, although there have not been much investigation in terms of those companies that have received the SEE mark, in terms of how easy it is for them to operate, how easy it is for them to win in the market, to gain people's trust, to work with the government, things like that. We still don't know much. So this is still subject for further investigation. So I think, but I do think if there is some form of third party, so that is my point. If there's some form of third party that can certify that you are really a social enterprise and you are not a normal company that pretend to be a social enterprise, then that will really help the sector. Because again, there is still a lot of confusion, a lack of understanding of what is social enterprise. Even to understand social enterprise, you need to explain somebody in 10 minutes and people lose interest. But if you say we are a company, we're selling this, people just understand it. Oh, you're just a business, you're selling this. But social enterprise, you need to mention the social part, the commercial part, and how they work together. The storytelling is quite complex. So that's why I think people, particularly in Hong Kong, they still think social enterprise is more like a charity. And in fact, well, maybe 50-60% of the social enterprises in Hong Kong are launched by non-profit organizations, or you call NGOs. But almost the other half are launched by private individuals who used to have business background. So, so we have kind of two origins of the people who develop the social enterprises. So I do think certification may help if there's still a lot of confusion, if there's still a lot of lack of understanding of what is social enterprise, maybe certification will help. But of course, they need to promote what is that certification is about to. Others people don't understand a social enterprise with a logo. People still don't understand what is this logo really means. Yeah. And regarding B Corp and ESG, yeah, I mean, in Hong Kong, I think there's some report that I've read written by some banks or consulting firm. They mentioned that in Hong Kong, the ESG is still at the stage of compliance reporting, because that is now a requirement by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And now if you are publicly listed companies, you need to report your E and S and G. So companies are just doing that in order to fulfill the requirement, just to report. But they have not really used that as a tool to transform how they operate as a business. But we can see a lot of examples overseas. Of course, many of them are not yet published and we don't have access to them. So some big companies that are using the ESG as a transformatory tool, to use the ESG as a way to make themselves run a better business. And in fact, there are more and more consumers that are supporting companies that are doing good. That is why there are some companies that want to label themselves as social enterprise, because they believe that consumers are willing to pay more. Consumers are willing to buy from them more if they know this company have a social mission, compared to this company just want to make money. So the trend from the consumers to put some preference or build some preference to buy from and to support this organizations that have a social mission in their business is growing around the world, and that's why I think the momentum is there. But yeah, B Corp is still very small. We still have to wait and see how they do it. And but one thing we can learn, but I think one thing the social enterprise sector can learn is the transparency that are provided by the B Corp. If you look at all the B Corp, they're all listed in some sort of website. Each one of them has a score along different dimensions. Have we seen this in the social enterprise? No. Most enterprises never report anything. If you have profit, that's why I go through all the length in the financial calculations. If social enterprise make profits, where do the profits go to? How do they spend the money? I know most of them, majority of them have a very good heart. They will not misuse the money. But we can learn from the B Corp. If the B Corp have this transparency approach in how they report what they do and their impact, that actually can really help. But most of this information nowadays are private information that no one have access to, except SIA fund, except social welfare department that need to give them this money, then they will have this information. But the public cannot see them. I think if the public can see this, they will know, oh, so this is how you guys operate as a social enterprise. Then the public have a better appreciation, and they may even further support social enterprises. That's my personal opinion.
Well, I think if this is the case, then ask the General Chamber of Social Enterprise to fine-tune the SEE mark rather than just give them a mark, right? I think I don't know whether they now have a website to show different kind of parameters.
So for example,
I'm not sure.
What HKGSE as a certifier of endorser of social enterprise is only have a website saying all the names are here, right? But they don't have these dimensions to report them, to report what happens to these different organizations. Again, that has a pros and cons, but I still believe that in a world where we have more open data, more open governance, people want to see more information, and that will help them. And that eventually, I think, could also help the social enterprise sector to gain more legitimacy, to build trust, public trust. I think without public trust, it's a bit difficult.
Okay, so Yanto, thanks a lot. I think we've taken up more time than you had granted us. So I must thank you, because I think each one of us have learned a lot, and it has been an excellent afternoon. And of course, I'm sure a lot of our students will want to ask you some questions in the near future. And in fact, even we would like to ask you some questions in the future. And we must stay in touch and have these kind of sessions more often, because we can see that a lot of people have really gained by your talk today. We have Dr. Carmen Sam. I think he wants to ask a question here. So maybe we can take that as a last question, and then we can end the session.
I'm happy to take more questions. I'm generous. Don't worry. As long as if you have to say we have to stop, we'll stop.
Is there? Maybe not. So then thank you, Yanto. And
Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you very much.
Excellent afternoon. And
Thank you so
like
much.
I said, let's stay in touch. And
Thank you so much for invitations.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.